My name is John Passfield, and the title of his reading will be John and Dickens, Video 14, John's Reaction to Dickens, Part 2. So it follows along from an earlier video. Here is the cover of the novella, John and Dickens, A Christmas Mystery. John finds himself in a room with characters from Dickens's earlier books who are surrounding the writer Charles Dickens in his chair. That's a young Dickens. You might have seen photographs of a much older Dickens. He died in 1870, but this is 1843, 30 years earlier, I guess you could say. Here's a summary on the back of the novel. Writer John Passfield leaves his home, buys a coffee, drives down to the shores of Lake Erie to perform a Christmas ritual, strolling along the beach at Port Maitland. It's something he's done for many years. But this year is different. This year, John suddenly finds himself in the writing room of famed Victorian novelist Charles Dickens, who sets out his new idea for a Christmas tale. Dickens invites John to watch rehearsals for the writing of the story. But as Dickens struggles through contentious negotiations with his amazingly independent characters, John wonders whether A Christmas Carol will ever be written. Advertising can be defined as the attempt by one human being to plant imagery in the mind of another human being which will affect the behavior of the second human being. That could also serve as a definition of the concerns of serious literature. Othello and Iago, Antony and Cleopatra, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Each of these characters attempts to plant imagery in the mind of the other character in an attempt to affect that character's behavior. It's a concept of serious literature because it's a concern of all human beings. We seek to plant imagery in the minds of other people and groups, and they in turn seek to plant imagery in our minds. And perhaps it could be said that it's the task of every human being to evaluate the imagery with which one is challenged, inundated, bombarded on a daily basis. So how then should John react to the imagery that the novelist Charles Dickens is attempting to plant in John's mind? Let's continue our look at John's reaction to Dickens' attempt to plant the imagery of a proposed Canadian novel in John's mind. So Dickens is planting the imagery of a proposed Canadian novel in John's mind. Should John be on guard against this? What is Dickens up to, I guess, is the question. So let's go to page 67 and continue on with this. 67. What in the world, John wonders, is Dickens up to? I just can't figure it out. He keeps insisting that he has created me. But if he did, then why do I keep believing that I'm real? Our realities are at odds. If he believes what he says he believes, and if he doesn't, then what reason could he possibly have to pretend? Okay, we go over the page to page 68, and here's some more of John's reaction. I could blow this whole thing sky high. I could say that I already knew, Mr. Dickens, that you visited Canada. I read about it in the books that were written after you died. I was born 100 years after you visited Niagara Falls. And what's all this blather about this book that you plan to write? I'm not your character, not a fiction, not a figment of one of your dreams. I'm a human. I'm flesh and blood, as real as you. But I know I'm not going to do that. It would be impolite, aggressive, confrontational. It would bounce the whole thing into a completely different sphere. Okay, then we go to page 70, spilling over onto page 71 with John's reaction. to Dickens' proposal. And yet, I have to wonder why I'm so placidly playing along. I wonder why I'm letting him get away with this. We're like two people, two knockabouts, Dickens and I, two vagabonds. And one is telling a story, gathering a crowd as he spins a yarn, and the other one is startled at all the inaccuracies, embellishments, inventions, fabrications in the story that his companion is telling, relating, composing, inventing, conceiving, and bringing to birth. A juggler convincing the crowd that he's juggling nuggets of gold from exotic lands, while what he's spinning is a blur of local stones that he picked up and painted the day before along the road. But the second fellow, the comic sidekick, the dull assistant, the thick-headed friend, he doesn't say anything at all. If a nugget should happen to fall, he would snatch it up and keep it concealed and hand it back to resume its place in the whirling blur. He stands in the glow of the brilliant dazzle and doesn't interrupt or deny. Because he's a listener too. The story's about his travels. He stands there wondering where the story is going to go. Okay, that was page 70. 71 and 72, a spillover again. It's quite amazing, though, to imagine. It's quite an intriguing thought to imagine what being a character in a Dickens novel would be like. This would put me in the company of Mr. Pickwick and Oliver and Sari Gamp, and even of people, of characters, that Dickens, this Dickens anyway, has not yet even imagined, like Sidney Carton or Edwin Drood. Though, I don't know, I still can't see myself as an author, even a fictional author in a novel, of the Dickens stamp. Okay, that was 72. Then we go to 73 for this. Storytellers tell stories. That's what they do. They are alchemists with words. They pluck gold dust out of the air and melt a handful down and pour the liquid into a mold of their own devising. A mold of their own shape and size. A boy in a blacking warehouse becomes a boy in an orphanage, with a bowl in his hands, wanting more. So, what does a Canadian from a woodlot near Niagara Falls become when he is plucked by a master storyteller out of the air? Okay, then on page 74, John's becoming a little intrigued with this idea of becoming a character in a Dickens novel. Actually, he's quite the forceful storyteller. In the process of making me a character, a Dickens character, a Dickens author character, he'll no doubt take me by the shoulders and set me aside and show me, in mime of course, but with a mixture of mime and words, the character that he's decided I'm going to be. Perhaps he'll write my novel, and my novel within a novel, after he writes A Christmas Carol, which he wrote in 1843. Well, slow down here. Let me think a little bit. Surely this isn't going to happen. This cannot come to be. A Dickens Passfield novel would not be historical, is not historical. There is, can be, no such thing. But of course Dickens can't possibly know this. He's alive and clearing his path as he moves through time. Hacking his path, it seems to me. He's not a creature out of time, as presumably am I. Should I tell him? Tell him everything? Or just wait and see where all this mystery novel talk is going to lead. So I'll leave it there. A little suspense, a little cliffhanger. There's more in the novella, but there won't be more in this particular reading, in this video reading. And I'll switch to another topic, which is a more general topic about literature in general. In a previous video talk, I mentioned that there are two kinds of imagery. I mentioned that imagery is, to me, life experience information that invites interpretation. So if something happens to you directly, which you feel invites interpretation about your life, I would call that direct information. And if you see or hear about life experience information which happened to someone else, to someone you know, to someone in the news, or to a character in a book, I would call that analogous information. So our minds are busy taking in information at all times. Information about ourselves and information about others. And we are busy deciding whether that information, that life experience information, is relevant enough to our own lives to be turned into imagery and interpreted. And we go through the very same process when we read a book. All items of information about the characters in that piece of fiction are examples of analogous information. Life experience that didn't happen to you directly, but happened to someone you're aware of. They are the life experience of a character other than ourselves. So here are two books, two items of analogous information that you might have read or might consider reading. One is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. A character has been attacked and left wounded by a very large entity, a whale. This character makes a lifelong quest to hunt down that entity, that element, that negative force in his life, and eliminate that force from his life, and in the case of his story, from the face of the earth. Well, people will tell you that it's a great novel. They will tell you that you should read it. They will tell you that you should value what it says. But in the depths of your mind, you are looking over the information of this story and deciding whether it is relevant to the life of yourself, to the life of your family, to the life of your friends, to the life experience of your society, and to the life experience of this planet Earth since time began. You might or might not decide that such a great book, Moby Dick by Herman Melville, is relevant to you. And in doing so, you will either process the Moby Dick life experience as imagery, or you will leave it as life experience information, which, though it might be relevant to others, is irrelevant to you. The other book is The Trial by Franz Kafka. A character finds himself put on trial. He's not told what crime has been committed. He's not told what he is suspected of having done in relation to that crime. He is not told what the charges are against him, and he doesn't know whether his answers to the questions that he's being asked will help or hurt his chances of being acquitted. Well, people will tell you that it's a great novel. They'll tell you that you should read it. They will tell you that you should value what it says. But in the depths of your mind, you are looking over the information of this story and deciding whether it's relevant to the life of yourself, to the life of your family, the life of your friends, the life experience of your society, and to the life experience of this planet Earth. You might or might not decide that such a great book, The Trial by Franz Kafka, is relevant to you. And in doing so, you will either process the trial life experience as imagery, or you will leave it as life experience information, which, though it might be relevant to others, is irrelevant to you. So don't ever be embarrassed or feel uneasy if people say you should read a certain book and you haven't read it. Perhaps it's not for you. This is how literature works. This is how literature works because this is how our minds work. We are constantly evaluating life experience, our own and that of others in our actual lives and of others in books, and deciding, both consciously and subconsciously, whether that life experience is relevant enough to our own lives to be able to yield meaning if thought about deeply. So this is my novella, John and Dickens, A Christmas Mystery. It's found on Amazon, where there's more information. It's found on my publisher's website, roxmillspress.com. It's found on my website, johnpassfield.ca. On my website, 2 free books, full-length books, a planning notebook, and a reflective journal. So have a look there at johnpassfield.ca. Click on those icons if you want to read about this novella, if you want to read about literature in general, and even life in general. Lastly, thank you for watching this video.